Jonah, please don't do this.
Don't touch me, I'm not the father.
You're the father, I swear.
She's fully dilated. Stay with her. No. The scan said girl. My family doesn't start with a girl.
Rebecca's fingers stayed stretched in the air, like she could still catch him, but the door had already slammed. The labour room shook, with sounds, metal trays clinking, nurses rushing, Rebecca's breathing turning into desperate cries. The fluorescent light above her looked too bright, too cruel. Abuja nights were usually calm outside. But inside that room, time was breaking apart. "Madam Rebecca, look at me," the nurse said gently, pressing a cool cloth to her forehead. "Breathe, small, small. You can do it." Rebecca tried. She really tried, but her voice cracked again. "Please, please, call him back," she whispered, eyes wet. "Tell him I didn't cheat. I don't even have strength for nonsense. Jonah is the only man I know." The doctor glanced at the file, then at her face. "Your husband just left?" Rebecca nodded fast, like if she nodded hard enough, the truth would change. He said, "I'm carrying a girl," she said, panting between words. "He said, it's not possible." He said, "It's not from his lineage." Her face tightened in shame as she repeated it. "That's what he called it." The nurse's mouth opened slightly in disbelief. "Ah, God," the nurse whispered under her breath, then quickly corrected her tone. "Madam, focus. Focus on baby." Outside the door, Jonah was already walking down the corridor, like the hospital didn't exist, like Rebecca wasn't behind him fighting for breath. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. His mind was busy with one ugly thought that had grown horns. A first child must be male. That's our bloodline. That's our proof. At the entrance of the maternity ward, he paused not because of guilt, but because he heard a woman crying loudly somewhere behind him. It sounded like pain, and it sounded like his wife. For half a second, his feet almost turned back. Then his father's voice played in his head, hard and proud. "Jonah, don't let any woman disgrace you. A man's first son is his crown." Jonah clenched his jaw and kept going. Back inside, Rebecca's body shook with another contraction. She screamed, not the kind of scream you act in movies. This one was raw. It tore out of her like it was dragged from her bones.
Alone.
I can't, she sobbed. "I can't do this alone. I can't." "You will," the nurse said, firm now, holding her shoulder, "because your baby needs you. Your baby is waiting for your voice." Rebecca swallowed hard, tears rolling sideways into her hair. "My baby," she whispered, and her voice softened like she remembered something sweet. "My little one." Then the door opened again, and a woman rushed in, breathing like she ran from the parking lot. Judith. She was still in her office clothes, a simple blouse, black skirt, handbag hanging on her elbow. Her eyes were wide with panic. "Rebecca!" Judith cried, hurrying to the bedside. "Oh my God! I came as fast as where is Jonah?" Rebecca looked at her, and that look alone answered everything. Judith's face changed. Shock first, then anger, then pain. "He left you?" Judith whispered, as if saying it loud would make it more real. Rebecca couldn't even talk again. She just nodded, and another contraction hit. Judith grabbed her hand instantly. Hey! Hey, look at me, Judith said, voice shaking but trying to stay strong. You're not alone. You hear me? You're not alone. Rebecca squeezed her hand like it was the last rope on earth. The doctor returned to the foot of the bed, checking monitors again. His brows pulled together. Nurse, he said quietly, her BP is dropping. Judith heard it. Her heart stumbled. What does that mean? Judith asked, trying not to sound afraid, but failing a little. Doctor, what does that mean? The doctor didn't answer immediately. He just looked at Rebecca's face and then looked at the nurse. Get me the emergency tray, he said. Now. Rebecca's eyes fluttered, confused, terrified. Judith, she whispered weakly, tell Jonah I didn't lie. Judith swallowed a lump in her throat, forcing a nod. I will, she said, even though she wasn't sure Jonah would even pick her calls. Then the monitor made a sharper sound, a quick, alarming beep that cut through the room, and the doctor's voice turned urgent. Rebecca, stay with us. Rebecca, stay with me. Judith's grip tightened. Rebecca, no, don't you dare close your eyes, Judith begged, tears already forming. Please. The nurse ran back in with equipment. The labour room suddenly felt too small, too hot, too fast. And somewhere in Abuja, Jonah was walking away, not knowing that behind him something was starting to go wrong, in a way money and pride could never fix. As Judith screamed for help, the doctor shouted one command sharp and frightening. Prepare for an emergency delivery. Now, push! The doctor shouted. Rebecca's head rolled weakly from side to side. Her lips were pale now. Sweat covered her neck. Judith held her hand so tight her own fingers were turning white. Rebecca, stay with me, Judith cried. Please, just a little more. The nurse pressed down gently. One more push, madam. One more. Rebecca gathered the last piece of strength inside her. It felt like lifting a mountain with empty bones. She screamed, and then a baby's cry filled the room. For a second, everyone froze. It's a girl, the nurse said softly. Judith broke into tears instantly. Oh, God, thank you. The baby was placed briefly on Rebecca's chest. Tiny, warm, crying loudly like she was angry at the world already. Rebecca opened her eyes slowly. A girl? She whispered. The nurse nodded. Rebecca managed the smallest smile, weak but proud. My baby, she breathed. My Amy. But something wasn't right. The doctor's expression didn't soften. Her blood pressure is still dropping, he said quietly to the nurse. We're losing too much. Judith looked up, confused. Doctor, Rebecca's fingers were already losing grip. Judith, she whispered faintly. I'm here. I'm here, Judith replied quickly, leaning closer. Take care of her, Rebecca said. Don't let her feel unwanted. Judith's chest tightened. Stop talking like that. You will carry her yourself. But Rebecca's eyes were already fading. The monitor beeped faster, then slower. Then a long, flat sound filled the room. No, Judith whispered. The doctor moved quickly. Nurses rushed in again, hands pressing, voices overlapping. Charge. Clear? Rebecca's body jerked slightly. Judith stood frozen, holding baby Amy tightly to her chest, unable to breathe properly. Again, clear, nothing. The doctor looked at the clock. And then he stopped. Silence. Just the baby's cry. "I'm sorry," the doctor said quietly. Judith didn't react at first. Her brain refused to accept the words. "She just had a baby," Judith said slowly, like explaining something simple. "She can't die. She just named her." No one answered. Judith looked at Rebecca's still face, her best friend, the girl she shared hostel with in University of Lagos, the girl who laughed too loud at movies, the girl who believed love would protect her. Gone. Judith fell to her knees. Outside, Abuja traffic continued like nothing happened. 3 days later, Rebecca was buried in her hometown in Enugu. The sky was grey that afternoon. Even the sun seemed distant. Jonah did not come. Judith had called him, sent messages, even sent voice notes. He replied only once. "She disgraced me. I have nothing to do with that child." Judith stared at the message for a long time before locking her phone. At the burial ground, she carried baby Amy in her arms. The child slept peacefully, unaware that her mother's coffin was being lowered into the earth. As soil hit the wood, Judith made a quiet promise. "I will not let you suffer," she whispered to the baby. "I will not let the world treat you like a mistake." Time moved fast. Amy grew from a tiny, crying newborn to a stubborn toddler who asked too many questions, to a bright secondary school student who topped her class. Judith worked harder than ever. She expanded her fashion business in Lagos Island, built something strong, something stable. Amy watched her, learned from her. By 28, Amy wasn't just successful. She was powerful. Sharp mind, calm presence, graceful voice. People respected her in boardrooms. She wore tailored suits, walked with confidence, signed contracts without shaking hands. She didn't know everything about her past, only that her father left. Judith never told her the full story. Not yet. Jonah's life did not move upward. It shrank. His once promising company in Abuja began to struggle. Contracts failed. Partners withdrew. Pride doesn't pay bills. He remarried at some point, but it didn't last. Arguments, accusations, financial stress. He grew quieter and older. Regret began to visit him at night. But regret is a slow poison. It doesn't shout, it whispers. One afternoon in Victoria Island, Lagos, Amy sat in her glass office, reviewing acquisition papers. Her company had just purchased a struggling manufacturing firm in Abuja, a small one, barely surviving. She signed the final page calmly. "Make sure management stays intact for now," she told her assistant. "Restructure gradually. Yes, Ma." She didn't even look at the name of the former CEO. It meant nothing to her. Down in Abuja that same week, Jonah sat at his old desk when HR called him. "The company has been acquired," they said. He blinked slowly. By who? The name sounded unfamiliar. Amy Rebecca Industries. Rebecca. The name hit him, but he brushed it aside. Coincidence, he told himself. He was offered a position as a branch manager, lower salary. But at least he kept a job. He accepted. Pride swallowed. One evening, while scrolling through social media in her Lagos apartment, Amy saw something that made her fingers freeze. A man had posted an old photo. Caption: "Regretful throwback. Life teaches hard lessons." She zoomed in. The picture showed a younger man standing beside a pregnant woman wearing a bright yellow Ankara gown. The woman's face. Amy's heart skipped. She knew that gown. There was only one old photograph of her late mother in Judith's house. Same gown, same smile, same face. Amy's breathing changed, and the man beside her mother, she had seen him before. In her office file, on the restructuring document, her branch manager, Jonah. The room suddenly felt smaller. Her chest tightened. "Who are you?" she whispered to the screen. The post was dated years ago, before she was born. Amy's mind began to connect pieces that had never been explained. Her phone slipped slightly from her fingers. That night, she drove to Judith's house without calling ahead. Judith opened the door, surprised. "Amy, is everything okay?" Amy stepped inside slowly. Her face was calm, too calm. She held up her phone. "Who is this man?" she asked quietly. Judith's eyes widened. Silence filled the room, and that silence said more than any words could. Amy's voice trembled slightly. "Auntie Judith, tell me the truth." Judith sat down slowly, because she knew the past had finally caught up. Judith looked at Amy and said the words she had hidden for 28 years. "That man is your father." Judith's words did not echo. They dropped heavy. "That man is your father." Amy didn't blink. She just stood there, phone still in her hand, the screen slowly dimming. "My father," she repeated quietly. Judith nodded once. Slow, careful. "The same Jonah who works under me?" Amy asked. That silence confirmed everything. Amy let out a short laugh. Not happy, not angry, just broken. "So all these years," she said softly, "I was signing salary approvals for my own father?" Judith swallowed. "I wanted to tell you when you were older, when you were stronger." Amy's voice rose slightly. "Stronger than what?" Judith's eyes filled. "Stronger than the truth." Amy paced the living room, back and forth, slow steps, sharp breathing. "He said he wasn't responsible?" she asked suddenly. Judith nodded again. "He left your mother in the labour room because the scan showed you were a girl." Amy stopped walking. Her face changed. It hardened. "He left her? Because I'm a girl?" Judith's voice broke now. "He said a first child must be a boy in his family. He accused her, said she disgraced him." Amy felt like the air had been pulled out of the room. "And my mother?" she asked carefully. Judith closed her eyes briefly. "She died minutes after giving birth to you." The words finally pierced. Amy sat down slowly. "She died? Alone?" "No," Judith said quickly. "I was there. I held her hand." Amy looked up. What were her last words? Judith hesitated. Then she answered. She said, "Don't let her feel unwanted." Something inside Amy cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like glass under pressure. That night, Amy didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed in her Victoria Island apartment, staring at the one old framed photo of her mother. Bright Ankara gown, soft smile, young, innocent. She placed the photo on her lap. "So he walked away?" she whispered. "Just like that?" Her chest tightened with something unfamiliar. Not just anger, not just pain, it was betrayal. From someone she never even knew. By morning, her decision was already made. Inside the office, Jonah adjusted his tie nervously. The restructuring had been intense lately. Meetings, performance reviews, budget cuts. He didn't know why HR suddenly scheduled a personal meeting with the CEO herself. He had never met her properly, only seen her at one major board meeting months ago. She was young, confident, cold almost. He remembered thinking, "That girl is sharp." Now he sat in the conference room waiting. The glass door opened. Amy walked in, navy blue suit. Hair neatly tied back, calm expression. She didn't smile. "Mr. Jonah," she said, taking her seat opposite him. "Good morning, Ma," he replied politely. She placed a document on the table. His termination letter. He frowned slightly. "Ma?" She slid it toward him. "Effective immediately." His heart dropped. "May I know my offence?" he asked carefully. Amy leaned back in her chair. Her eyes didn't leave his face. "Do you remember Rebecca?" she asked. The name hit him like a slap. He blinked. "Rebecca?" he repeated slowly. "Yes," Amy continued calmly. "Rebecca, your wife. The woman you abandoned at the labor room 28 years ago." His breathing shifted. How do you know that name?" he asked. Amy leaned forward slightly. "Because she was my mother." Silence swallowed the room. Jonah's hands began to tremble. "No," he whispered. "Yes," Amy said, voice steady. "I am the girl you said couldn't be yours." Jonah's chair scraped slightly against the floor as he tried to stand, then sat back down again. This is not possible," he muttered. "You said your family must start with a boy," Amy continued. "You said what she carried wasn't from your..." His face drained of colour. "You left her to die alone." "She didn't die because of me," he said weakly. Amy's voice rose for the first time. "She died because she had no husband holding her hand." Jonah's eyes filled with tears. "I was young," he said. "I was foolish. I was under pressure from my father." "And she wasn't," Amy snapped. "She was pushing out a child alone." He covered his face briefly. "I regretted it," he whispered. "When?" Amy asked. "After she was buried." He couldn't answer. She stood up slowly. "You asked for a reason for your termination," she said quietly. "That is your reason." He stood up too, desperate now. "Please," he said, voice cracking. "Give me a chance. Let me explain. I didn't know she died. I swear I didn't." "You didn't attend her burial," Amy cut in. He froze. Tears rolled down his cheeks. "I was ashamed," he admitted. Amy shook her head slowly. "Shame doesn't raise a child." She walked toward the door. "Wait," Jonah begged. "Amy, please, let me make it right." She stopped but didn't turn around. "There is only one condition," she said. He held his breath. "Revive my mother," she said quietly. "Let her forgive you herself." His knees nearly gave way. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Exactly," Amy replied. She opened the door. Security was already waiting. Jonas sank back into the chair, sobbing. As Amy walked away down the hallway, her hands shook slightly, but her face remained calm. Outside the building, the Abuja sun felt too bright. Jonah remained inside the empty conference room long after everyone left. He stared at the termination letter on the table. His daughter, the girl he rejected, now powerful enough to end his career with one signature. He whispered to himself, "Rebecca." But Rebecca would never answer. That night, Jonah sat alone in his small apartment. The silence felt louder than any insult. He looked at an old drawer. Inside, it was the only photo he had kept. Rebecca in her yellow ankara, pregnant, smiling. He touched the photo gently. "I was wrong," he whispered, but the apology came 28 years too late. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, Jonah's mind was unraveling. His phone buzzed once. A bank alert. Final settlement. Severance pay. And nothing else. He stared at the ceiling for a long time. His breathing grew slower. His thoughts darker. And by morning, the security guard downstairs noticed Jonah's door hadn't opened. He knocked. No answer. Knocked again. Still nothing. He reached for his phone to call the landlord. Inside the apartment, something was terribly wrong. The landlord forced the door open and gasped. The landlord pushed the door open fully. The smell hit first. "Jonah?" he called out carefully. No response. The curtains were half drawn. Morning light entered the sitting room in thin lines. The security guard stepped inside behind him, and then they saw him. Jonah was lying on the floor near the sofa, empty pill sachets scattered beside him, an overturned glass of water, his phone a few inches away. "God!" the security guard whispered. They rushed closer. But it was already obvious. Jonah had chosen silence. Permanent silence. Later that day in Lagos, Amy was in a board meeting when her assistant entered quietly. "Ma," she whispered, "there's urgent news from Abuja." Amy excused herself and stepped outside. "What is it?" The assistant hesitated. "It's Mr. Jonah." Amy's stomach tightened. He passed away this morning." The hallway suddenly felt long. "What do you mean, passed away?" Amy asked calmly. "He took his own life." The words landed softly, but they shook something deep inside her. For a few seconds, Amy said nothing. Her face didn't change, but her fingers tightened around the files she was holding. "When is the burial?" she asked quietly. "They're still arranging it." She nodded once. "Okay." That was all. She walked back into the meeting room like nothing had happened. But her voice, when she began speaking again, was slightly slower. That night, Amy sat alone in her living room. Judith sat across from her. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Judith broke the silence. "Do you want to attend?" she asked gently. Amy stared at the framed photo of her mother on the wall. "No," she replied after a pause. Judith nodded slowly. "He begged you," Judith said softly. Amy inhaled deeply. "Yes. Do you regret your decision?" Amy's eyes filled slightly, but she blinked the tears back. "I asked him to bring my mother back," she said quietly. "He couldn't." Silence. "But," Judith added carefully, "his death was not your hand." Amy closed her eyes briefly. "I know," she whispered, "but it still feels heavy." Jonah's burial was small. Few people came. Some old colleagues, distant relatives, no wife, no children, and the daughter he once rejected did not attend. As soil covered his coffin, whispers floated around. He was once successful. He had a daughter somewhere. Life humbles pride. The wind blew softly that afternoon, and just like that, a man who once walked away from a labour room was gone. Life continued, but Amy changed, not in anger. She began funding maternity support programs across hospitals in Abuja and Lagos. She created a foundation in her mother's name, the Rebecca Care Initiative. Its mission was simple: no woman should give birth alone. Judith stood beside her during the official launch. Reporters asked Amy what inspired the foundation. She paused, looked at the cameras, then said softly, "My mother died giving me life. She deserved better. No drama, no details, just truth." That evening, Amy visited her mother's grave for the first time in years. The sky was calm. She knelt down. "I met him," she whispered. The wind moved gently through the trees. "He cried," she added. "But it didn't change anything." She swallowed. "I don't hate him anymore," she said slowly. "But I can't pretend it didn't happen." Tears finally slipped down her cheeks. "I hope you forgave him, wherever you are." She placed fresh flowers gently on the grave, then stood up, stronger, not because the pain disappeared, but because she understood it. Moral lessons. 1. Pride can destroy what love is trying to build. 2. Gender does not determine value. 3. Decisions made in anger can echo for decades. 4. Forgiveness is powerful, but it cannot erase consequences. 5. No woman deserves to face childbirth alone. The story of Rebecca, Jonah, and Amy reminds us that choices, especially cruel ones, do not disappear with time. They grow, they return, and sometimes they demand payment in ways we never expected. What did you learn from this story? If you enjoyed the story, comment and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories. Don't forget to tell us where you are watching from.